What happens when the Department of Justice, the very institution built to uphold truth and protect the law, is accused of punishing one of its own for refusing to lie? That's the explosive question Senator Chris Van Hollen threw straight at Attorney General Pam Bondi in a Senate hearing that quickly turned into a public reckoning. At the center of it all is a veteran whistleblower with 15 years of service who says he was fired for refusing to sign off on a brief he believed was dishonest. But as Bondi tried to deflect, the scandal only deepened, touching not just whistleblower protections but even funding for...
But generally, would you not say that if we thought something was coming out of a neo-Nazi playbook, it doesn't have any place in our Department of Defense? Now, Secretary Hegseth, the quote that I just read you was referencing Ms. Kingsley Wilson, the DOD press secretary. It's a direct quote from her, who my Republican colleagues on this committee have also expressed alarm over due to her comments. In fact, one colleague said, and I'm going to quote again, "Obviously, I don't agree with her comments. I trust the Pentagon will address this," end quote. However, in the months since, not only have you not addressed these anti-Semitic comments, you have promoted Ms. Wilson. This seems to be at odds, honestly, with President Trump's commitment, very public commitment to combat anti-Semitism, which you just said you two agreed with. So, Secretary Hegseth, given the rise in anti-Semitic violence, hate crimes in our nation, and to show that the Trump administration, your administration, does have a zero-tolerance policy for anti-Semitism, will you dismiss Ms. Kingsley from her role as a U.S. military spokesperson today, yes or no?
Again, that's why I referenced the context and characterization.
Well, we'll send you the quote,
I've worked directly with her. She does a fantastic job, and there's any suggestion that I or her or others are party to anti-Semitism is a mischaracterization attempting to win political points.
Sir, and I'm going to say
Senator, you're attempting to win political points on the backs of mischaracterizing the statements of a member of my department, and I'm not going to stand for that.
You are not a serious person. You are not serious about rooting out, fighting anti-Semitism within the ranks of our DOD. It's despicable. You ought to be ashamed of yourself. I'm going to move on to General Hawk. The sudden and inexplicable dismissal of General Hawk. He serves both director of the National Security Agency, commander of U.S. Cybercom. It's deeply concerning, raises significant questions about the decision-making process, its potential consequences. Public reports indicate that the removal of General Hawk, who has served his country proudly, has been influenced by social media influencer, a personality on social media, Laura Loomer, spreads conspiracy theories. She's been denounced even by Republicans. And the idea is that any leaders within our agencies responsible for our nation's security, somebody would be dismissed based on the advice of a social media influencer is alarming, to say the least. It's surely not how we should be running our military. So were you consulted regarding General Hawk's dismissal, yes or no?
Well, Senator, I would not advise believing everything you read in the media. And I'm consulted on every single decision.
Okay,
I'm the decision maker for the department, and we all serve at the pleasure of the president. And we have the prerogative to make those decisions the best for the country, and we did that.
Did you personally approve Mr. Hawk's dismissal, yes or no?
Anyone coming or going at the Defense Department, especially at that level, would ultimately be a decision made by me, and I stand behind that.
Did you personally relieve him? Did you personally relieve him? Yes or
Anyone
no?
at that level
You did,
who is
so that's a
relieved
yes.
would be relieved by the Secretary of Defense.
Was there a specific justification for General Hawk's dismissal? Was there a specific justification for General Hawk's dismissal?
Ma'am, we all serve at the pleasure of the president, and the president deserves the type of commanders and advisors that he thinks will best equip him to accomplish the mission.
Did you discuss General Hawk's dismissal with Laura Loomer prior to his removal?
I don't discuss who I talk about anything with, but ultimately this is my decision, and he serves at the pleasure of the president, and that's why he's no longer there.
So do you believe it's appropriate for any social media personality to influence personnel decisions in your department, yes or no?
I believe your time is up, Senator.
Oh, it is not up to you to tell me when my time is up.
Well, the time
And I am going to say,
Senator.
Mr. Secretary, you're either feckless or complicit. You're not in control of your department. You're
crime victims. The story begins with Erez Ruveni, a career attorney who spent more than a decade at the DOJ. He wasn't a low-level staffer or a troublemaker looking for attention. By all accounts, Ruveni was decorated, commended, and respected for his work during the Trump administration. That's what makes his decision to speak out even more shocking. In his whistleblower complaint, Ruveni claims he was pushed to sign an appeal brief he believed had no basis in evidence or law. When he refused, he says he was promptly shown the door. His words cut right through the legal jargon. "I didn't sign up to lie." That single sentence set the stage for one of the most contentious Senate hearings in recent memory. When Van Hollen confronted Bondi, the tension in the room was immediate. This wasn't about policy nuances or minor disagreements. It was about whether the Department of Justice itself had crossed a red line. Van Hollen asked her directly, did she believe zealous advocacy meant telling untruths to the courts? It was a pointed question designed to cut through the political theater and force Bondi to clarify her stance. Instead, she leaned on the classic shield of pending litigation. She said she couldn't discuss the case, citing ongoing lawsuits and attorney-client privilege. But the longer she danced around the core issue, the more it looked like she was dodging accountability. Rather than address the substance of Ruveni's claims, Bondi pivoted to defending her closest allies inside the DOJ. She singled out Amal Bowe, a senior official whose confirmation hearing for a federal judgeship was happening at the same time Ruveni's complaint surfaced. Bondi painted Bowe as brilliant, ethical, and unfairly maligned by the whistleblower's accusations. She also invoked Todd Blanche, her deputy attorney general, as another trustworthy figure who supposedly refuted Ruveni's account. To Bondi, the timing of the complaint was remarkable, almost as if she believed it was a calculated hit job designed to derail her team's advancement. But to many listening, it sounded less like a defense of principle and more like circling the wagons to protect loyal insiders. The longer the hearing went on, the more it became clear that Van Hollen wasn't going to let Bondi slip away with canned responses. After all, this wasn't just about one attorney's job. It was about whether the DOJ under her leadership had become a place where political loyalty mattered more than truth. And just when it seemed the whistleblower issue had hit a wall, Van Hollen shifted gears, pointing to another brewing scandal inside the department. He pressed Bondi on why the DOJ had abruptly terminated hundreds of grants, including programs that provided services to crime victims. These weren't minor slush funds or obscure pilot projects. Some of the grants had been in place for years, funding shelters, legal aid groups, and training for law enforcement. Cutting them wasn't just an accounting decision. It pulled the rug out from under people and organizations who depend on federal support to survive. Van Hollen made it clear these cuts weren't abstract budget debates, they had real consequences for real people. Bondi's response didn't exactly calm the waters. She admitted the department had cut funding by about 6%, but tried to soften the blow by inviting senators to call her if they cared about a specific grant. She even promised to review appeals on a case-by-case basis. On paper, that might sound like an open-door policy. But in practice, it came across as tone-deaf. Telling lawmakers to personally petition her while shelters and victim support groups scramble to keep their doors open only reinforced the perception that this DOJ is more concerned with political optics than people's lives. Van Hollen wasn't satisfied either. He reminded Bondi that 30 senators had already written to her about frozen funds from the previous fiscal year and they hadn't received a response. To him, this wasn't just about individual grants or bureaucratic delays. It was about whether the DOJ under Bondi was operating with transparency and accountability at all. When oversight committees can't even get basic answers about funding, it raises bigger questions about what else is being hidden behind closed doors. And that's the thread that tied both controversies together, the whistleblower retaliation and the grant cuts. In both cases, the DOJ was accused of punishing truth-tellers and neglecting victims while top officials shielded themselves with privilege and procedure. Whether intentional or not, the message being sent was clear: if you speak out against the department, you risk your career, and if you depend on the department, you might just become collateral damage. For a place that's supposed to embody the rule of law, that image is devastating. By the end of the hearing, Bondi's deflections had left more questions than answers. She insisted that zealous advocacy always meant acting ethically, but her refusal to explain why Ruveni was punished told another story. She promised funding announcements would come very shortly, but the damage had already been done to countless programs left in limbo. And she pledged loyalty to her deputies while offering nothing to reassure whistleblowers that their honesty would be protected. It was a masterclass in stonewalling, but not in leadership. Van Hollen, for his part, made it clear that the stakes couldn't be higher. If the DOJ starts firing people for refusing to lie, it sets a precedent that erodes the very foundation of justice. If the DOJ slashes victim services without accountability, it undermines public trust in the government's willingness to protect its most vulnerable citizens. And if the DOJ keeps hiding behind attorney-client privilege and vague promises, oversight itself becomes meaningless. This isn't about partisan politics or grandstanding, it's about whether one of the most powerful institutions in the country is serving the people or just serving itself. The hearing may have ended, but the ripple effects are only beginning. Ruvani's lawsuit will proceed, and it may reveal more about the inner workings of Bondi's DOJ. The funding cuts will continue to impact shelters, advocacy groups, and law enforcement agencies across the country. And lawmakers like Van Hollen will keep pressing for answers because the questions are too serious to ignore. At its core, this clash was about one thing: accountability, and accountability is either alive or it's not. There's no middle ground. So the question remains, what kind of Justice Department do we really have right now? Is it one that protects whistleblowers and victims, or one that silences critics and hides behind technicalities? The answer matters far beyond this one hearing. Because if truth-tellers are punished and victims are forgotten, justice itself starts to crumble. And once that happens, getting it back won't be easy. If you found this breakdown important, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think the DOJ under Pam Bondi is protecting the law or protecting itself? And if you want to stay ahead of stories like this, make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications because the next one is even more controversial.